the ownership of a gun is no different than the ownership of a fire extinguisher. It's not that we want a fire to happen. It's that we want to be prepared in case one does happen.
Good point. Yeah, I mean, it's like wearing your seatbelt. Are you wearing your seatbelt because you're looking to get in a car crash?
Right. I'm hoping for a big whiz bang of a crash today. Buckle up, kids.
Bringing you law, gospel, and guns. Welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio.
Welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio, a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network. I'm your host, Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, and this is episode number 56. Armed Lutheran Radio is about gun rights, the Second Amendment, the natural right of self-defense, and we consider those issues in light of the gospel of Jesus Christ. How should we, as Christians, think about those issues? Today's episode is made possible by the fine folks at Cook's Holsters, American-made custom Kydex holsters with a lifetime warranty and a 100% satisfaction guarantee. Check them out at cooksholsters.com. I hope you had a great week. Mine was crazy. Lots of stuff going on at work. Lots of work going on at Armed Lutheran Radio. We're finalizing our plans for the 2017 IDPA season. And Team Armed Lutheran Radio is going to be huge. We're dedicating our shooting jerseys to the men and women who wear the badge, and in memory of all who fell in the line of duty in 2016. The jerseys look awesome. I'll be sharing more about those in the coming weeks. In addition to myself and Sergeant Bill, our contributor Aaron Israel is also joining the team, as is Samuel Williams. Now, Sam is a confessional Lutheran from Tupelo, Mississippi, who ran into Sergeant Bill at the Fall Brawl last year. You may remember him from his appearance on our first Shooters Roundtable back in episode 45 last year. Also joining us will be another of Dallas's finest, Arnold Brown, another member of our local shooting club. Really good guy, good shooter. We're growing by leaps and bounds, as you can tell. Our first match is the first weekend in March, and the entire team is going to be there. It's in Thibodaux, Louisiana, for the Battle on the Bayou. Should be awesome, and we'll provide you with some information about that match as we get closer to it. And in other news, contributor Aaron Israel of Fundamental Defense is hosting a series of defensive-focused shooting two-day classes this spring at my home range, Mission 160 in Whitewright, Texas, and at Triple C Tactical in Crescent, Texas. Sergeant Bill and I took the one-day class last year. It was really fun. Aaron is an excellent instructor, by the way. The curriculum was developed by Rob Pincus. It's designed to teach you how to work with your body's natural reactions to make you a more efficient, more effective, should you need to use your firearm in self-defense or in defense of others. So check out the show notes for information on how to register. Use the promo code Lutheran to save some money on the tuition as well. In other contributor news, if you can't get enough of Mia's motivations, we can't blame you. And you're in luck. Mia Anstine has launched her own podcast. It's called Mac Outdoors with Mia and Leah, and it features Mia and her daughter, Leah Legit, sharing info about hunting and shooting and all kinds of stuff. I think it's going to be a fun show, so I encourage you to check that out. It's called Mac Outdoors with Mia and Leah, and you can find a link in the show notes or visit miaanstine.com for more information about that. And finally, before we get the show started, Armed Lutheran Radio just celebrated our first anniversary, January 31st. We've come a long way from the 24 downloads that we had a couple of days after the podcast launched. Armed Lutheran Radio scored our 12th straight month of growth, 12 months with more downloads than the previous month. Thank you so much for your support, for downloading, subscribing. We're working really hard to produce a show that you find fun and informative, and we're so grateful for your support. To celebrate our first anniversary, I'm excited to announce the launch of our first membership site. I hinted at this in our newsletter a couple of months ago. The Reformation Gun Club is open now. Club members will receive access to members-only audio archives, including Ballistic Minutes with Sergeant Bill, Mia's Motivations, Aaron's Self-Defense Tips, Clinging to God and Guns, and special guest interviews, plus members-only content that will not be available anywhere else. Clinging to God and Guns and many of the interviews that we record are edited for time when we do our post-production. But Reformation Gun Club members will get access to full-length interviews, so you'll get content that was never released on the show. We'll be adding more and more each month, and we're planning on some video content as well, so I'm really excited about that. You'll get a welcome pack with some really cool Gun Club swag, plus access to a closed Facebook page where you can interact directly with other Gun Club members and with the Armed Lutheran Radio contributors. And you'll get special members-only discounts on Cook's holsters, Armed Lutheran swag, and fundamental defense training classes. Those are available right now. You'll get 15% off of Cook's holsters, 15% off of any Armed Lutheran swag that you buy at the Armed Lutheran shop, and I think 20% off of fundamental defense training classes, and there are more discounts in the works. So 2017, of course, is the 500th anniversary of the Reformation, which began on October 31st, 1517, when Martin Luther nailed the 95 Theses to the door of the Wittenberg Castle Church. In honor of that historic event, one-year memberships for the Reformation Gun Club are $15.17 per year. That's just, $1.26 a month. So go to the website, armedlutheran.us, click on the Reformation Gun Club link in the menu at the top of the page and check it out and sign up today. Now, what do we got going on in today's show? Mia Anstine, as promised, is going to be sharing more information about the gear that she discovered at SHOT Show, and today she's talking suppressors. Aaron has a little bit of a different tip this week. He's talking about defending your finances, and a little bit longer segment, and it's a good one, so pay attention to that. I don't know about you, but I am a fair weather shooter. I hate shooting in the cold. I just cannot. I hate cold weather. It's why I moved to Texas. It just so happens that Sergeant Bill is going to be talking about winter carry in his Ballistic Minute this week. And in Clinging to God and Guns, Pastor John Bennett and I will be dissecting an article from the Huffington Post by a philosophy professor who apparently flunked logic class. All that is straight ahead, right here on Armed Lutheran Radio.
The percentage of women who own guns is growing. American women are more knowledgeable and better equipped to defend themselves than ever before. So, why is it that every time I go to a gun shop, I feel like they're talking down to me? Like, hey little lady, let me show you what you need. It's like all they want to do is sell me a pink gun. If you're tired of feeling that too, visit Guns for Gals, a specialty firearms boutique designed to empower women with information about firearm safety and to equip them with the means to protect themselves. The owners go out of their way to find products specifically for women, and they actually listen and ask questions to help you find the right products to meet your needs. If they wouldn't own it themselves, they won't sell it. Guns for Gals is located at 2035 Central Circle, Suite 108 in McKinney, Texas. Open Monday 1 to 6 and Tuesday through Thursday 11 to 7. And on weekends, you can find them at a gun show near you. Or shop online at www.gunsforgals.com. Guns for Gals, more than just a gun shop. It's how gun shopping should be.
Up next, it's Mia's Motivations with Mia Anstine.
Hey Hey everybody, so last week I mentioned that suppressors were all the rage at this year's SHOT Show. And this is primarily due to the changing of leadership in our country, and also on January 9th, the ASA, or the American Suppressor Association, announced the reintroduction of the Hearing Protection Act. And so Knox Williams, the president and executive director of the ASA, stated, "The American Suppressor Association believes that citizens should not have to pay a tax to protect their hearing while exercising their Second Amendment rights. And while it's a lengthy process to get the legislation passed, you can currently apply for a license to purchase a suppressor. You can find additional information about that on the ASA's website. In case you didn't know, they share suppressors have been federally regulated since the passage of the National Firearms Act in 1934. Suppressors are included in the NFA's regulations of the transfer and possession of certain types of firearms and devices." The ASA continues that currently prospective buyers must send in a Form 4 application to the ATF and pay a $200 transfer tax per suppressor. They have to undergo the same background check and process that is required for you to purchase a machine gun. And they have to wait months for the ATF to process and approve the paperwork. Well, contrary to popular belief, silencers are not silent, and they in fact are noise reducers. They also are not used by assassins. So let's learn a little more about silencers and suppressors. Last fall, I had the opportunity to visit with Eric Wu of Advanced Armament Corporation. He shared a background of silencers, stating the initial patent was filed for silencers in 1908, and today there are 1 million silencers privately registered in the United States. He also shared 5 benefits of using a suppressor. He used the acronym SHARP to help us understand the importance as well as some of the uses for silencers. First of all, S is for safety. If you don't have ear protection and you blow out your ears, that of course is not safe. And I happen to know a few hunting friends who have done just this. They either don't bring hearing protection or they lose it while they're out on the hunt. So also, if you have earplugs, you cut off your senses from your surroundings, and not being able to tune into your surroundings is not safe. All the other benefits support this one, safety. It's all about safety. Next is H, hearing protection. Of course, we mentioned that. There are many people who have lost their hearing or have severe hearing damage. So, hearing protection, H. A is for accuracy improvement, and depending on the rifle and the silencer combination as well as the ammunition, you can reduce the turbulent effect, creating an increased velocity, and this is called a free bore boost, which increases the trajectory of the projectile, thus making you a little more accurate. R is for recoil reduction. A silencer or suppressor adds weight and it extends the barrel, which will reduce recoil. This is beneficial to new shooters, to youngsters, and to others who just may be overall intimidated by recoil. P is for preservation of night vision. Silencers contain muzzle blast, thus reducing the flash. You don't become night blind, and this is a benefit primarily to soldiers and law enforcement officers, but also to those who may hunt at night. So, as you can see, silencers have benefits that a lot of people don't think of. The introduction of the Hearing Protection Act is beneficial to many, and we saw a lot of new products at SHOT Show that display how many companies know what a benefit this is going to be. Remember to always be safe with firearms, and don't forget your eyes and ears. You can learn more about suppressors at the American Suppressor Association's website, and that's americansuppressораssociation.com. You can also find Advanced Armament on the interweb at advanced-armament.com. Have a great day. Talk to you next week. Bye, friends.
You can read more from Mia and watch her YouTube videos at miaanstine.com.
Hey, AK pattern rifles are known for their rugged reliability in all types of conditions. The best AK pattern rifles come from the desert of Arizona. Lee Armory builds AK pattern rifles using premium imported parts. Lee Armory's enhanced receivers are properly heat treated with CNC drilled trunnion and scope mount holes, Tapco triggers, polished bolt carrier and hammer, receiver rails modeled after the Saiga design to prevent bolt carrier jump, and barrels made from 4150 vanadium steel nitrided to 1200 degrees to make them harder, more durable, and more accurate. Plus, they offer a limited lifetime warranty. The AK pattern rifle is legendary for its reliability. Lee Armory takes the AK and adds a whole new level of quality and customer service. Available at Copper Custom, Classic Firearms, AIM Surplus, and Elite Ordnance, or visit leearmory.us to see the entire line of Lee premium AK rifles, optics, and accessories. Lee Armory premium AK pattern rifles, born under the Red Star, perfected in Arizona. leearmory.us.
Hey, this is Tony Ray of the Liberty on Point podcast, where we examine current events and politics to determine how they affect our liberties and freedoms. You can find us on iTunes, Spreaker, TuneIn, Stitcher, Google Play, and many other podcast hosting sites. You can also find us on the Self-Defense Radio Network, along with many other great podcasts. So go over to selfdefenseradio.net and check us out, and we'll see you there.
It's time for this week's self-defense tip from Aaron Israel of Fundamental Defense.
Hey folks, this is Aaron Israel with Fundamental Defense here with your personal defense tip of the week. This week I want to take off the gun instructor hat for just a brief moment and talk to you about something that you probably don't think enough about, but that really has to do with your personal defense, and that's defending your finances. Now, while it's possible that you could be put in a situation where you have to use physical force to defend yourself from another human being, something that's way more likely to happen to you and probably already has if you've been in the economy long enough, is you end up losing a job, the economy goes down, and you get your pay slashed, or bad things happen in the area of finances, and a lot of people in America just aren't prepared for it. We've just come through a pretty tumultuous time period in our history when it relates to the economy. We've gone through a recession that's been the worst since the Great Depression, and we're starting to recover from it now with the new president and all of those good things, and people are excited about good times being back and the economy starting to rebound. But you need to be prepared for the fact that the economy is cyclical and eventually it'll go down again. You could lose your job tomorrow, and there's all kinds of personal finance things that could happen. Your water heater could explode, you could blow a tire, you could run into a deer like I did last weekend, and you have to be able to prepare to pay for those things. Otherwise, you can end up in a bad situation. Financial woes cause a lot of marriages to break up. They cause a lot of turmoil in people's families, and sometimes they even cause people to contemplate suicide and things like that because they don't have their finances straight. So I want to talk to you about some basic principles that you can adopt that'll help you defend your finances from the things that happen in the economy and that happen on a day-to-day basis. The first principle that you need to develop is to implement a written budget and stick to it. A budget is simply a document used to plan how to spend every dollar of income that you bring in. You put your monthly income at the top, you subtract out your essentials such as your monthly rent, your mortgage payment, your heat, your electricity, your water, internet, cell phone, groceries, and then what you have left after you pay those essentials is what you refer to as your disposable income. That surplus cash you can dedicate to having some fun, you can use it to retire debt if you need to, you can put it into savings, or you can invest it. When you go through the physical exercise of actually making a budget, you're likely to find areas where you're probably spending more than you should be, and you can start to cut back those areas and become more efficient in the way you use the money that you bring in. The second principle is not to buy things that you cannot afford. And yes, that would include guns and ammo. Sorry to break it to you. If you can't afford a gun and pay cash for it, then you shouldn't be buying it. That means if you can't fit something in your budget, you don't buy it. And some people take afford to mean I can get a loan for it or I can put it on my credit card. But what I mean by afford is you can pay cash for it. If you can't pay cash for something, which means that you can support it with the income that you're bringing in, then you really can't afford to own it, and your lifestyle doesn't match your wage. I'm a big fan of Dave Ramsey. A lot of these principles that I'm talking about come from being a part of his Financial Peace program. If you haven't been to Financial Peace University, you need to check that out. But he says act your wage, and I think act your wage is the best way that I can put that. If you don't make enough money to have certain things and pay cash for them, then you need to either start making more money, spend your money more efficiently, or really, develop your lifestyle and trim down in such a way that you're living within your means. The third principle is to set up a rainy day or emergency fund. It amazes me. There was a study done not too long ago that something like 80% of Americans don't even have $1,000 in their bank account to be able to cover basic expenses that might happen, whether it's a blown tire, hitting a deer. I had to pay $750 deductible on my insurance because I hit that deer. If I didn't have money in the bank, I wouldn't be able to afford that. So having an emergency fund, you can start out with something simple like $500 if you're strapped for cash right now. And eventually, as you start to get better at budgeting and putting money away and learning how to cut back on things that you don't need, you can build that emergency fund up. I like to have about 20% or so of my income in that emergency fund so that if I have a big crisis like losing my job or something like that, I'm not going to have to worry about keeping the lights on and keeping the bills paid until I find something else. And working in the oil and gas industry, that's something that I want to be prepared for because it's very boom and bust. And a lot of the industries that we're in can be just like that, whether it's real estate or what have you. The economy is cyclical. The fourth principle is to kill whatever debt you already have and then avoid it like the plague. When financial hard times come about, which they're going to, you can't avoid them. It's part of life. You don't want to have creditors coming to take your stuff, repossess your truck, put your house in foreclosure. If you want to defend your personal finances, you need to develop an allergy to monthly payments. Like I said, I work in the oil and gas industry, and it's very volatile. When times are good, people rake in the cash, and when times are bad, the smart ones still have it, and everybody else goes out and buys a truck that they can't afford and new rims and those kind of things and financing it, and then they end up having to lose those things when the oil patch goes down because they spent and lived above their means during the good times. So when you're making money, you ought to be avoiding debt like the plague, and when you get a little bit extra, throw it at the debt that you already have. A lot of us made financial mistakes when we were younger, from taking out too many student loans to buying cars we couldn't afford, things like that. You can retire that debt if you just get after it. Think about loading that extra money that you have at the end of the month into your AR to kill debt. Load that AR up and shoot it at the threat that is the debt monster until the debt monster's gone. And once you finally get that debt killed, then you can have freedom and you can have more money to spend on things you want to do, like taking classes, going to IDPA matches, buying new guns, buying all the kinds of things that go with being a gun enthusiast or whatever your other hobbies are. So think of your finances as a weapon, and you'll realize how important it is to control that weapon. And living off of debt is kind of like outsourcing your personal defense to someone else when it's really your responsibility. You don't want to be living with other people's money because when times get hard, they're going to come calling, and you don't want that to happen. The fifth principle, once you've killed your debt, you've got an emergency fund, you've got all those things set up, would be to start investing in your financial future. That may mean saving up for your kids' college, saving up for your retirement, investing. Maybe you always wanted to own a lake house, putting some money away for something like that. Once you kill your debt and you have your finances under control and you've got a good budgeting process, you're going to have more extra money to put away to do those things that you like to do before you die, whether it's take a trip or what have you. So always do that. Always have a plan for what you're going to do when you get old, or, hey, I want to travel and I want to do things like that. Put money away for that, make a plan for it, and you can do it when you don't have that debt hanging over your head and you're telling all your money where to go every month with a good budget. The last principle I want to give you is you need to have a plan for what if you don't wake up tomorrow. So if you don't have a last will and testament, it's very easy. You can do those for free online now through places like LegalZoom, or you can go get with a lawyer and do it the traditional way. Get yourself a last will and testament so that if you were to die tomorrow with some tragedy, whether it be gun-related or you get in a car accident or you just have a health issue and you end up dying, that the people that you leave behind don't have to wonder what to do with your assets. It saves them a lot of trouble. And also think about getting some life insurance. If you don't have life insurance, then what would your kids and your wife or whoever it is that depends on you do if you weren't here tomorrow? So think about those things. Think about setting up a will, setting up a life insurance policy, and getting those things squared away. Financial stress can crush your dreams. It can destroy your marriage. It can break up your family. So defending your personal finances is just as important as defending your physical body as you walk around with a gun in the public space. So you can have a gun and be prepared for a scenario that's way less likely to happen, but if you have your finances in trouble, you're going to be avoiding a lot of things that happen to people pretty commonly. So the bonus, you'll be able to afford more guns, ammo, and training when you have more money in the bank. But in all seriousness, try to get on a budget, stop buying things you can't afford, kill whatever debt you have, Put money away for emergencies and start preparing for more fun things to do in the future, like have enough money in the bank that you don't have to work the rest of your life. I can promise you that in taking these principles to heart, you'll reduce your stress significantly and you'll be far more likely to live a long, happy life. That's your personal defense tip of the week. Thanks for tuning in.
Aaron Israel is a Personal Defense Network contributor and owner of Fundamental Defense. You can find out more and sign up for any of Aaron's classes at fundamentaldefense.com.
As many of you know, Sergeant Bill and I are competitive shooters. We're also reloaders. Bill helped me to get started last year, but I've still got a lot to learn. One thing I do know, though, you need a good source for supplies and components. So let me tell you about U.S. Reloading Supply. Yeah, there are bigger suppliers out there, but what sets U.S. Reloading Supply apart from the rest is their dedication to customer satisfaction. Check them out at usreloadingsupply.com. They carry the top name brands like Starline, Rainier, Barry's, Remington, Spear, and Hornady. If you've got a special order like primers and powder that you don't see on their website, give them a call for a quote. I did and got a great price. Excellent customer service, fast delivery, prices that include shipping, and a promise to match or beat any retailer's price, including shipping. Call them today, 941-451-7357, or visit them today at usreloadingsupply.com and use the promo code Lutheran2017 to save 10% off your order. usreloadingsupply.com.
If you carry a multi-tool or pistol magazine every day, check out RAE Gear high-quality tactical sheaths. Designed with the needs of law enforcement, military, first responders, and concealed carriers in mind, RAE Gear sheaths are made from powder-coated stainless steel, making them strong, corrosion-resistant, and lightweight. They feature a spring steel belt clip for easy deployment and removal. Your tool or magazine can be easily accessed with just one finger, and yet the integrated retention keeps your tool or magazine secure even when turned upside down. RAE Gear's tool sheaths are designed to work with a variety of Leatherman brand multi-tools, and their new line of quick deployment mag sheaths offer the same tough construction and corrosion resistance for carrying most double-stacked 9mm, 40 caliber, and 357 SIG magazines. Check out the full line of products at www.raegearusa.com and be sure to use the promo code ALR at checkout and save 10% off your order. Recognize, assess, execute. raegearusa.com.
Time now for another Ballistic Minute with Sergeant Bill Silvia.
Hey, I'm Sergeant Bill, and this is your Ballistic Minute. Today we're going to talk about colder weather concealed carry. Alright, now the weather's gotten cold, it's winter, even here in Texas. It gets cold every couple days or so. You're going to end up probably wearing more layers and jackets and stuff like that. So when it comes to carrying a gun in colder weather, it's going to be harder to get to that gun. It's also going to be easier to hide a bigger gun, and it's also going to be easier to hide more gear. So extra magazines, flashlights, whatever stuff that you want to carry on your belt or however you want to carry it will be a lot easier to do. Here's some tips, tricks, or advice I have for carrying in colder weather under all these layers of clothes and or jackets. If you're going to be wearing a jacket and you have a shirt that's going to be untucked, tuck your shirt behind your gun under your jacket. So if you're carrying on the waistband or even in the waistband, tuck your shirt behind the butt of your gun so it'll be easier for you to get to when you sweep your jacket out of the way. Practice in dry fire getting to that gun. Practice pulling up your jacket, or if you might have to leave it unzipped depending on how that jacket fits. And like we do a lot of times in the competition world in IDPA, put some keys or another weighted object in your gun side pocket. So if you're doing it with your jacket open, unzipped, you can sweep that jacket aside, and the weight of the keys or whatever it may be in your pocket will cause the jacket to stay out of the way for a second so that you can get to your firearm. And last but not least, if you're going to go out wearing gloves, you need to determine if you can shoot in those gloves. So put your gloves on and practice in dry fire with your gloves on. See what it's like. It's a lot different. Take that to the range. Put your gloves on, go to the live firing range, load your gun up, and fire it. it's very different than it is with bare hands. For me, I have a hard time shooting with anything but really thin gloves on. I've tried it in dry fire, and I've taken it to the range. The trigger doesn't feel right, the grip doesn't feel right, it just doesn't really work too well for me, so I make sure my gloves come off quickly and easily. Try them out, see what works for you. Keep practicing. I'm Sergeant Bill, this has been your Ballistic Minute.
Sergeant Bill Silvia is a 15-year veteran of the Dallas Police Department and masterclass competitive shooter. You can watch Sergeant Bill's shooting videos at armedlutheran.us/Sergeant Bill.
So you have your concealed carry permit or license to carry. Now what? Now you need a good holster. Not one of those cheap neoprene prophylactic holsters you can buy in the big box stores. You need a holster custom built for the firearm you intend to carry every day. Check out cooksholsters.com. Made in the USA, Cooks Holsters are available in a wide range of colors and designs for inside the waistband or outside waistband carry. They carry a lifetime warranty against defects and a 100% satisfaction guaranteed. Visit www.cooksholsters.com and use the promo code ARMEDPODCAST and take 15% off everything in the store. You put in the time and effort to legally carry a firearm for personal protection. Protect your firearm with a custom holster from cooksholsters.com.
Hello, this is Pastor Brian Wolfmueller of Table Talk Radio. Hey, pay attention, because you're listening to Armed Lutheran Radio.
Up next, we're clinging to God and guns with Pastor John Bennett.
Welcome back to Armed Lutheran Radio. Time now for another episode of Clinging to God and Guns with our good friend Pastor John Bennett. Pastor, welcome back.
Thank you, Lloyd. Good to be back.
Well, this week we're looking at an article from the Huffington Post from December of 2015 by a philosophy professor. I think I saw in another one of his articles that he has a PhD in philosophy, Michael Austin, who it says is a professor, author, and speaker. And he is a gun control advocate, no surprise there. And his article is entitled, "What's Wrong with God and Guns?" There's a T-shirt that has a picture of a Bible and a gun surrounded by the words, "Two things every American should know how to use, neither of which are taught in schools." And naturally, he jumps right into the gun part and ignores the Bible part.
Right. Well, it's ironic because, we've talked about this time and time again, that we don't have a gun control problem. We have a heart problem in our country. Mm-hmm. And that heart problem, if you look at the course of events, there is a strong correlation between the open attack on the Christian faith and the oppression of any public expression of the Christian faith, especially within the realm of education, and the increase in violence. If you were to look at a chart of here's the increase in gun violence, here's the decrease in the free exercise of the Christian faith within the public square, you'd see that very clear correlation. It's ironic, but
yep.
So he's completely dismissing the fact that, hey, maybe the fact that we're spitting in God's eye as a nation might be part of the problem here.
Might be. The mixing of God and guns seems to be a uniquely American recipe, but it's not a good one. More people died this week in America, victims of yet more mass shootings. And the same conversations about gun control, gun rights, religious extremism, mental health, and how this is now normal in our country continue. But another mass shooting will occur today, and tomorrow, and the day after that. We average more than one per day. To which I say, bull crap. That's not even close to being true.
It's funny that if you set the definition for a term, you can make it mean whatever you want it to mean. Let's completely ignore the fact that according to serious statistical analysis, that these attacks happen where? In gun-free zones. I believe it's 96% of all mass shootings happen in gun-free zones.
Yep. Over the last, 50 years? And this idea that a mass shooting happens every day, this is just the advocates of gun control have sort of tweaked the idea, like you're saying, the definition of what is a mass shooting in order to get down to, oh yeah, we have one every day, when in reality, the definition that we've gone with for years, we have 20 to 25 a year.
Right.
It's pretty steady and has been for a number of years now.
That's right.
There are important moral, legal, and social facts that can be brought to bear on this debate. Here, however, I'll discuss some religious arguments related to gun laws, in part because so many people attempt to combine guns and God, Christianity, and a Colt 45. I kind of like that, actually. I think I'm going to use I think I'll use that. I think a strong religious argument in favor of more restrictive gun laws can be made, grounded in Christian ethics. First, both the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament consistently conceive of God as being especially concerned with the poor, the outcast, the weak, and the vulnerable. See Isaiah 32, Isaiah 60, Romans 14, James 1. Gun violence is especially prominent in economically depressed areas. It's also prevalent in cases of domestic violence where women and children are vulnerable and victims. Surely these are good reasons from a Christian moral perspective to have more restrictive gun laws.
The irony here is that the majority of the areas that have the greatest levels of gun crime are in the areas that also have the most restrictive gun laws.
Yes.
He's taking a look at the conclusion, and he is assuming the wrong cause for that conclusion. Yeah, certainly there are areas that, because they are economically oppressed, to use his language, that they have a increase in gun violence. But go to some of the poorest parts of the country. Go to the Appalachians, where you have people that don't even have running water and electricity. And they're not running around shooting each other left and right.
Not every day.
The argument falls flat on its face because it's happening in those areas that have the most restrictive gun laws. The fact that these people are suffering economically is just a byproduct of the terrible laws that have been governing these neighborhoods for decades.
Yep. And this is just terrible. I mean, I know you've got to be able to pass a logic class to get a philosophy degree, I assume.
You would think so.
You would think. I mean, I did terrible in logic when I was in college, but even I know that this is just a horrible fallacy. Yeah. You know, God cares about the poor. The poor are the most affected by gun violence. Therefore, Christianity supports gun control. There's just... It doesn't follow. I mean, but you could take this same argument and do this. You could say, God is especially concerned with the poor. Children can be a financial burden on poor people. Therefore, there are good reasons from a Christian perspective to support abortion.
Right.
Right? Or, God is especially concerned with the poor. Schools in poor, economically depressed areas are failing. Therefore, there are good reasons from a Christian perspective to spend more money on the Department of Education. You can take this logic, this is the God is a liberal hippie fallacy, and you can apply that to any social justice thing that you want.
Right.
Well, what about the effect of gun control on the poor and their ability to defend themselves from criminals?
Right.
Right? I mean, that's what the McDonald case was about.
Yeah, if you look at also that so much of these, for example, you have some cities, I believe Washington, D.C. is one of them, that they're trying to put this egregious tax upon the purchase of firearms to make it nearly impossible for somebody who is of low income to legally acquire a firearm, or at least a reliable firearm. I mean, it's, yeah, sure, they can go get their Jennings $100 swap meet special, or their high point. Well, I guess a high point, those are actually quite reliable. I saw a video once where it's almost impossible to kill one of those things. But you're making it, if you have a 50%, or in some cases there's been proposed 100% tax on the sale of firearms and ammunition, you're making it almost impossible for someone who is poor to defend themselves.
Right. Or I think it was early in the Obama administration, the suggestion that we should outlaw cheap guns, that, the cheap Saturday night special kind of guns should be illegal. And I wrote an article about that in defense of cheap guns for that very reason. The poor can't afford to go out and buy an HK. They can't afford to go out and buy a Springfield or a Glock. They can afford a Raven or like you say, a Jennings or a Jimenez or a High Point, and use it to defend themselves in these neighborhoods where, in many cases, the police aren't able to control the violence. And unfortunately, a lot of places, like you say, Seattle was, I think, the most recent example. Seattle has this gun violence tax. So for every gun you buy, they tack on, I think it's like $25. So who does that really impact? Because the good people who want guns for protection or for competition or hunting are going to go outside the city limits. They'll go get their guns legally because they can afford it, and they have legal, lawful, reasonable purposes to own them. But the people who are stuck inside the city, $25 may not sound like a lot to us, but it's a lot to a business owner, and it's a lot to somebody who's only able to maybe buy a High Point.
Right.
It's almost half the price of the gun.
And if you look at the issue that we have is crime, and he's trying to correlate a lack of gun control laws. Do we really have a lack of gun control laws in this country? Last time I checked, no.
Well, and it's also the absurd argument that violence is purely because of poverty. It's really because of criminals. It's not because of guns. It's not because of poverty. It's because you've got bad people and nobody's able to stop them or doing enough to stop them. We're not putting them behind bars and leaving them there. The citizens in those neighborhoods aren't able to successfully defend themselves against them because of these crazy gun control laws. The problem, like you said, is the heart and not lax gun control laws.
Right.
Second, the New Testament consistently opposes violence. Well, here we go again. As New Testament scholar Richard Hayes puts it in The Moral Vision of the New Testament, quote, "From Matthew to Revelation, we find a consistent witness against violence and a calling to the community to follow the example of Jesus in accepting suffering rather than inflicting it," end quote. The New Testament teaches nonviolent love for one's enemies in Matthew 5:38-48. It's the role of government to bear the sword, not the individual person, Romans 13, and that followers of Jesus should accept even the theft of their own possessions rather than using violence to defend them. That from Hebrews 10.
As you said earlier, bull crap. Romans 13 teaches, yes, that it is the government who bears the sword, but it doesn't say that the individual can't. That's a load of hogwash. Besides, our government says that the individual can. We call it the Second Amendment.
Yeah, this is that common fallacy that if the Bible doesn't prescribe it, then it must not be permitted.
Right. The argument from the position of silence, which is a terrible argument. It's like saying the Bible doesn't explicitly say that a man can't marry a man, so obviously it must be okay. Gosh. Anyway, let's take a look at this critically for a minute there. He's right. Yes, from Matthew to Revelation, we find a consistent witness against violence and the calling to the community to follow the example of Jesus and accepting suffering rather than inflicting it. Let's take a look at self-defense for a moment. What is self-defense doing? It is preventing the inflicting of violence upon myself or my loved ones or the innocent bystander if I'm in that sort of situation, in exchange for causing suffering, if it does lead to actual pulling the trigger on the one who wishes to intend harm to you. So the argument is it doesn't hold. It's that same old roll over and die argument, kind of like what we had last week. Well, I shouldn't say kind of like we had last week, like the guy strongly argued from last week. Roll over and die. It's just
the whole idea that self-defense, again, it's the confusion of self-defense and vengeance. What the Bible's talking about violence is intentional violence, is anger with that with malice in your heart. The revenge or avenging yourself instead of leaving that to the Lord, as opposed to preventing violence,
right.
Which if you're preventing someone from committing an act of violence against yourself, how can that be How can that be unchristian?
Right.
This last bit of the sentence, the followers of Jesus should accept even the theft of their own possessions rather than using violence to defend them. Well, as you've heard here on this program from me, from Aaron Israel, nobody advocates the use of violence to defend property, to defend your stuff. That's not what self-defense is about.
It's defense of self, not defense of possessions.
I would add that it is hard to imagine Jesus if he were present in our culture carrying a gun. And as the exemplar for Christians, this is significant. Some deny this claim based on a passage from chapter 22 of Luke's Gospel. Prior to his betrayal and arrest, Jesus tells the disciples, "If you don't have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one." Gun advocates interpret this as a justification for the status quo. But when they do this, they ignore the context of the passage. This is interesting. Later in the chapter, a follower of Jesus uses a sword against the servant of one of the religious leaders involved in the arrest. Jesus tells him, "No more of this." Moreover, the context of the passage reveals that the point of the exhortation to purchase a sword is to fulfill an Old Testament prophecy, not to use for violence against others. Now, this is interesting because we looked at this before we started recording, and I, for the life of me, can't figure out what that means.
Yeah, he's taking just a little snippet out of Luke 22 and saying, see, look, it's only talking about fulfilling prophecy. And this is precisely what it says here. Jesus just tells them, when I sent you out before with no money bag or knapsack, etc., were you lacking anything? And then he says, starting with verse 36, "But now let the one who has a money bag take it, and likewise a knapsack, and let the one who has no sword sell his cloak and buy one. For I tell you that this scripture must be fulfilled in me." And he was numbered with the transgressors. For what is written about me has its fulfillment. And they said, "Lord, look, here are 2 swords. And he said to them, "It is enough." So he's trying to point to where Jesus says, just after giving them the instructions to prepare themselves for the road ahead, that Jesus says this is to fulfill prophecy, that he was numbered with his transgressors. He immediately jumps on that and says, well, see, it's only to fulfill prophecy, therefore it doesn't apply to us. Well, I've said this many times before, that Jesus isn't prescribing to every Christian that they have to own a firearm. That's not what this passage is about. This was prescribing to his disciples to be prepared for the road ahead that would be beset with danger. That's what Jesus is talking about here. The other side of it, too, that you had mentioned before we began recording today, that there's a bunch of real kook translations
right.
out there that make it seem like Jesus is yelling back and forth with his disciples, and that's not the case. There's nothing in the Greek to suggest that. And in fact, the word here that Jesus uses as recorded in the Greek when it says, "it is enough," is the word that means sufficient. So Jesus is saying this is sufficient. Now, we can't know with 100% certainty if he was saying 2 guns are enough, or 2 knives are enough, or 2 swords or weapons or whatever, or if that was sufficient teaching for the day. We can't know for certain, but it doesn't suggest in any way that, no, you can't own it because I'm just fulfilling this prophecy with my disciples.
And so he finishes like this: "I am not a pacifist, and I am not an advocate for outlawing guns." There's a but coming. There's a but coming. "I think there are good arguments in support of the claim that we possess a right to self-defense. But this doesn't justify the current gun laws in the U.S. Common sense and Christian ethics lead to the conclusion that we need more restrictive gun laws in the United States."
You look at every single shooting that's happened. Well, I shouldn't say every single shooting because there are a few exceptions. But what gun laws, as you always like to ask, what gun laws could have prevented this?
Right.
We looked at Sandy Hook, where you had a guy who killed his mom and took her gun. We look at the Orlando shooting, where the guy was under investigation by the FBI, but because of the political correctness of the Justice Department under Obama, nothing was done about the guy. We could look at case after case after case where in some ways the gun laws actually failed because the government didn't follow through on their end, but there wasn't any gun laws that could have prevented it.
Well, look at the how restrictive the gun laws are in Europe, and yet they still have gun violence. In fact, with automatic weapons. Look at the gun violence that we just saw in Quebec this past week, and they have very restrictive gun laws in Canada, and yet they still had a mass shooting.
Right.
It's not about restricting the rights of law-abiding citizens in order to curb the evil of people who aren't going to obey the law in the first place. That's just fairy tale land.
It's like we see, for example, New York City with some of the craziest cigarette taxes that there are. Has it reduced the incidence of lung cancer and smoking-related cancer by having these ridiculous taxes? In fact, it's actually led to the increase of crime of illegal cigarette sales, of people buying cigarettes at Indian reservations and trying to sell them to the public.
Laws like that try to...
they restrict our liberties, what they do.
They restrict our liberties, and they don't actually end up solving the problem that they were passed to solve. And violence in our inner cities particularly has more to do with parenting and morality and the lack of decent police work. No offense to police officers. It's because of the politics that's involved, not because of the police officers themselves. It's because of political correctness, and it's because of a culture, a liberal culture in this country that has basically said, sit back, we'll take care of you. You don't have to take care of yourself.
Right. Perfect example is obesity. I don't think anyone would deny obesity is a problem in the country. Go to your local Walmart. I'm telling you, it's all over the place. But the solution to obesity isn't, we don't have obesity because we just haven't banned enough Twinkies.
Right, or 32-ounce big slurp sodas or something.
Right. We're not going to be able to pass enough laws to limit irresponsible behavior. Mm-hmm. People are still going to behave irresponsibly, and the law is not going to stop them.
Right. The trick is to try to limit the damage that can be done to other people, to good people, by those. You don't limit that damage. You don't protect good people by disarming them or by taking away their choices for how to live.
Right.
All right. Final thoughts on this one?
This article sucked. Well, a more serious evaluation of it. We see time and time again how a person takes their political convictions and superimposes it over God's word and says, see, God supports my position. The classic putting words into God's mouth, putting God in a box type of argument. What we need to do is take a look at what is causing these problems within our society and look at real solutions instead of just saying, well, we keep doing the same thing over and over and it hasn't worked, so we're just obviously not doing it enough.
Right. Exactly right.
He opened up talking about the problems among the poorest of our country and how the greatest victims of gun violence are in these terrible neighborhoods. So instead of doing things like preventing people from adequately defending themselves, let's do things to strengthen the family. Let's do things to improve the conditions for these people. Let's do things to make their lives more prosperous by getting government out of their lives and letting them be free.
Right. And actually doing something to clean up the streets by putting the bad people behind bars and keeping them there.
Right.
Yep.
How many times have we seen somebody fall victim to a criminal who had been released before his time was fully served?
Yep. Well, and it's very rare that the people who commit these kinds of crimes, these violent crimes, it's rare that they are actually not already a felon. They've already done this before.
Right.
They're repeat offenders of some sort. Listen to Sean Sorrentino's Felons Behaving Badly segment on the Gun Blog Variety Cast. Heard right here on the Self-Defense Radio Network, by the way. Every single one of the bad actors that he brings up, they've got rap sheets as long as your arm. These are not just, good people who suddenly, because they have a gun, do a bad thing. They've been doing bad things their whole lives.
Yep.
And we've got to find a way to change that instead of taking away people's liberties. All right, well, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of Clinging to God and Guns. If you have any questions or comments that you'd like to send to us about what you've heard today, visit the feedback page, send us an email, or leave us a voice message. We'd love to hear from you. And tune in again next time for another episode of Clinging to God and Guns with Pastor John Bennett, right here on Armed Lutheran Radio.
John Bennett is the pastor at St. John's Lutheran Church in Willow Creek, Minnesota. For more information, visit stjohnswillowcreek.org.
And that's going to wrap it up for another episode of Armed Lutheran Radio. Thank you for downloading, subscribing. Thank you for listening. Thank you for another month of growth, and it gets bigger and bigger each month. It gets better and better because our contributors are fantastic people, and I got to thank Pastor John Bennett, Sergeant Bill Silvia, Aaron Israel, and Mia Anstine for doing such a wonderful job on the show and helping me out with this. And thank you all for your continued support as we continue to grow month after month. Tune in again next week for another episode of Armed Lutheran Radio. Until then, keep shooting, keep praying. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Armed Lutheran Radio. For show notes, be sure to visit our website at www.armedlutheran.us. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, and TuneIn. This podcast is made possible by Cook's Holsters and contributions from listeners like you.